Welcome back to the Old Soul Millennial channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to install aftermarket heated seat elements to your car or truck. Specifically, I'm going to be installing these on my 2020 F250. It's a diesel, it takes forever to heat up in the wintertime, so these are going to be a really nice accessory added to that truck. So, first things first, I want to talk about this kit, where it comes from, where you can buy it, and why I chose this kit over other kits out there on the market. So this kit comes from Amazon. I'll leave a link down in the description below where you can find this. And it's made by a company called Besond, B-E-S-O-N-D. And it is manufactured in China, but there's a reason I chose this kit over other kits out there. First things first, let's talk about what you get. So you get 4 of these elements. So this will cover 2 seats because you have the bottom elements and then you also have the backrest elements. So there's 4 of these, and there are clips, so you can disconnect these from the harness in case you need to pull the seats out of your truck, which that's a nice touch. You also get these pieces of specialized tape in case you need to cut or modify these elements. Next thing I'll say, if you do need to cut or modify these elements, there's very specific instructions that you need to follow when doing that. And that's another thing I really like about this kit is the instruction manual. Although this kit is manufactured in China, the English in this instruction manual and the description on how to install everything is extremely precise and extremely thorough. So, you know how sometimes you buy some cheap stuff and the instructions are very confusing? You're not going to be confused in here. Really top-notch instruction manual, really happy with that. The next thing I'll say I really like about this kit, complete wiring harnesses. So there's a wire harness for each 2 pads because this covers 1 seat, so 1 harness covers 1 seat. Now, this is a pretty nice harness, I will say. First thing, look at these wires. Pure copper stranded wire. Not any of that aluminum clad nonsense. So they definitely didn't cheap out on these harnesses. There's a nice relay in here, inline fuse, and everything has connections. So in case you need, once again, in case you need to remove your seat, you can disconnect it, pull your seat out. You don't have to cut through any wires for maintenance purposes in the future. So I really like this. There's also a nice little jacket to help protect the wires from chafing if you're worried about that. Now the final thing I'll say about this kit, which I really like about this kit, is the dial. I don't have any of the dials on the table. I'll take you inside the truck right now and show you what the dials look like and how I install them. But with a lot of kits on the market, you have a 3-position dip switch, right? You have the off, setting 1, and setting 2. With this kit, there is a roll style dial with 5 different settings plus off. So I like that there's more adjustability with the heat of these elements. Now when it comes to installation of these elements, the way I see it, you really have 2 options. Option number 1 is you could just lay these elements directly over your existing seats and then buy seat covers so that way that these get protected. That would be probably the simplest and the quickest way to install these. But I'm looking for a cleaner, more professional install. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to unbolt my seats. I'm going to bring them onto the welding table one by one. We're going to disassemble them and install them underneath the vinyl. Yes, I do have vinyl seats. It is possible to have heated seats on vinyl seats, and I'm going to show you that today. So those are the 2 ways I see that you could really install this kit. So first things first, I need to go in the truck, disconnect the battery, because you do need to disconnect the battery because in these cars and trucks now they have quite oftentimes airbags in the seats. I'm not sure if my truck has that, but I don't want to risk triggering that. So first thing we're going to do, disconnect the battery. We're going to unbolt the seat, bring the seat on the table, and start disassembling it. All right, it looks a little bit intimidating, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as it looks. Well, I really hope not. So I know on some cars and trucks, they're going to have something called a hog ring, which is basically a metal ring. And in order to install these, you're going to need to cut those hog rings and you're going to need to buy a new hog ring installer kit, which basically has these rings that need to be closed thankfully with my truck, and I'm sure many other modern products out there, they don't have hog rings. For my truck, looks like we have all these plastic hook clips. So I would recommend that as you disassemble your seat to take pictures so that way you remember exactly how to put everything back together. So for me, it looks like the first thing I'm going to need to do is remove this electrical connection, and there's these rubber bands which hook on these yellow hooks right here. So we're going to need to undo those, and as we fold that down, there's actually a zipper seam right here, which that should allow us to start unzipping the back of this, and then we're going to try and see if we can gain access to the backrest. So on my truck, after I undid these zippers, I realized that there was another connection, and it's this connection right here, and it's basically kind of like a knuckle grip where you have one piece of plastic for the backrest kind of hooked on like there, and then connects to the top piece of vinyl by another knuckle connection. You could see the two connections there. So I'm thinking all I got to do is get in here and just separate these two pieces. Beautiful. When I did one of my first review videos of that truck, one of the biggest things I complained about was the lack of back support in these seats, and this is some chintzy stuff. Really cheap crap if you ask me. So if I am going to do anything to add back support, now is going to be the time to do it, but I guess this is what you could get when you buy the XL model. So before we turn the seat back over, once again we have these plastic clips. There we go. Yeah, there's kind of like a little hook on the back of this. So you got to get in there with like a little pick tool like this and start at one end, pop it out. There should go now. Yep, beautiful. Okay, so in order to remove the vinyl on the backrest, we're going to need to disconnect this line that goes to the side airbag. Now with this clip, I believe this is a dual stage clip, so first you have this red tab, so that red tab just kind of slides up, and then you got to push down on the yellow right here, and then you can undo the clip. We're going to need to take out this little Christmas tree clip, just a pry tool. I'm going to get a Sharpie. I'm actually going to mark where that was plugged into, so don't forget later. Put a little star right here. That's got to get clipped in there, and it was also clipped in right there. And from here we're going to need to take this clip. There's honestly another body clip up here. Let me show you what's going on. So here's the airbag harness. Here's the airbag harness. That's what we just disconnected. As you can see, there's a little hole, so it goes through the seat material in the backrest. This is actually probably where we're also going to sneak down our wires for the heated seat elements. But anyway, the airbag harness is clipped in to the sheet metal right here, so we're going to pop that off. We're going to take this harness, feed it through the cover right here, and then we should be able to unfold the backrest, and then we'll get back to working on the bottom cushion. Push that under. Alright, we're getting there. So this vinyl is just tucked in between the plastic where the tilt lever is, so we just need to untuck this. Start unfolding everything. And you do want to be careful because this is where your airbag is. So I do believe the airbag is kind of formed, or well, it's sewn into the vinyl cover itself. So we're going to try not to screw around with that side too much. Hopefully, by peeling back this side, it's going to give us enough room to install that element. And I think we're going to be okay. Not 100% sure yet, but I'm running into my first issue now. As mentioned earlier on, these seats do not have hog rings. However, along this seam and this seam, I believe on the bottom seam right here and perhaps right here, there's like a little piece of wire that keeps the seat cover positioned in that channel, and in order to remove that wire, there's two kind of like, I'm not exactly sure what they look like. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and pop it off very carefully. I actually have some plastic pry tools, so we try to prevent any damage to these components. So I have all these plastic pry tools I'm going to try using. And then after I figure out how to pop these clips off and remove that positioning wire out of those centering clips, I'm going to draw an illustration on my whiteboard just to give you guys a good idea of how to pop this kind of stuff off. All right, at this point I believe I have enough clearance to sneak my hand up in here and install the heating element and have it adhere properly to the foam back here. One recommendation I would have, if you do have airbags on the side of your seat, try and avoid that side. Try and work more on the opposite side of the seat, because really this is all the room that I think we're really going to need to do this. Now, another important thing to note upon, which I was talking about a moment ago, is there are these blue rails attached to the vinyl material, and they are received into the foam in the seat by these little orange clips, which are spaced approximately every 5 or 6 inches. As promised, here's a diagram of kind of what it looks like. So here's the blue, which is attached to the vinyl material, and then you have these orange clips. So as you can see, the blue rail has kind of like a little point here and a little point here, and the orange clips kind of come up and over, and they hook on over that blue rail. So what I did, and you can do this however you want, I used a little right-handed pick, and you got to be careful when you do this, just make sure you don't penetrate through your seat. But I just came in here with the pick and I pried this orange back, and then I took the blue rail and I actually flipped it up. So I pulled this back enough, this orange back enough where I could flip up the blue rail, and then eventually it just popped up and over the orange, and I didn't break any of these clips. And mind you, it's actually pretty cold in this garage. It's probably like 34 degrees, so this isn't too bad. Don't be afraid to do this. This isn't as bad as it looks. But we still need to figure out how to remove the rest of the bottom vinyl. So I think we're going to look into doing that now, and then we're going to get on to installing the elements. So we're getting there. Once again, we have something securing the vinyl to the bottom of this seat, so let's flip over the seat again and see what we missed. Okay, so as for the bottom seat cushion, there is a piece of fabric right here that connects either side of the vinyl. You can't see it because it's hidden behind the metal right here, but there's a strip of plastic, or no, a strip of material that connects either side of the seat cushion. Now, we could push down this foam, which this foam is part of the bottom seat cushion, try and shove it down in there and get that fabric to kind of go up over that. I think there's a little bit too much foam for me to attempt that, so I think we're going to switch gears here, and I'm going to start unhooking the vinyl along the bottom lip of the seat, and I think we're going to start at, well, this would be the front of the seat, the front of the bottom cushion. I think we're going to try and unhook all these clips and then try and fold it back. All right, I have all these plastic clips disconnected up to this point. I'm going to see if we can avoid taking off the clips on that side, because on that side of the seat, that's the side faces the outside, and I really don't want to take that plastic trim piece off if I don't have to. But let's talk about these clips and how they connect. So along the edge of the seat where you sit, there is kind of this metal lip. And how this material attaches to this metal lip is with this plastic clip. And there's these plastic clips. There's one here, and then there's two pretty large ones on the bottom. So what happens with these plastic clips is you actually flip this over and then you push it up and it pinches onto this metal lip. So once again, in order to get those off, just use my right-handed pick, and I kind of came in on the lip and then I pulled out and I was twisting it a little bit. I didn't break any clips and everything came off, so this is just something that you're going to have to do, and you'll figure it out. As for the seatbelt, there's a little rubber band that the seatbelt kind of goes through, so I just removed the rubber band from the seat belt. I'm going to flip this seat back over yet again, and we're going to try taking off the seat cover, try and peel it back from that corner right there. And there we go. All right. So what really helped there was just taking my hand and kind of fishing it in between the foam and the vinyl material. So once again, we have those blue rails and those orange clips, so I'm going to have to remove these clips, and probably the back clips. And from there, and we should be able to install the elements. Okay, so we have enough room now to install these heating elements. Before I talk about the heating elements, because there's some important things that we need to go over there, I'm going to talk about how I peeled back the cover the rest of this way. So there's a channel here, and a channel here. And again, it was the same style of clips, only the rail was clear and not blue, so I undid all those. Also, I talked about that piece of fabric along the back piece of foam back here that I was having a bit of a hard time dealing with. Let me turn on the flashlight. You can see that piece of fabric right here. What I did, I just snuck my hand underneath the seat right there, and I pulled back this foam. I was able to kind of shimmy this fabric down along here. You can see the fabric right there. And that gave me enough room to gain the access that I needed. Now, let's talk about these heating elements, because it's really important that we install these properly. So first things first, let's take a look at how they're constructed. If we shine this up to the light, you'll notice that there's a power wire, a ground. There's a little bulge right there. That bulge is actually a thermostat, and it's really important that we install that properly. And also, if we look along the tape, can you see those zigzags? Well, those zigzags are kind of like the main power feeds for this element. All these checkers, or whatever you want to call them. I don't know, got a little bit dirty. So that's what supplies the power to all these checkers. Now, if we're going to modify this, because we are going to need to modify this, because we need to make sure that we can reinstall these rails. The proper way to do this is to cut out a rectangle in the middle of this element. We want to make sure that we leave at least 1 5/8 on either side of these checkers. So we're not going to cut here, and we're not going to cut here. We're just going to cut out a rectangle in the middle of this. Now, if your pad is too long, say it extends over the edge of the seat like that, and you don't want it like that, you can cut clean through the whole element. Only after you do that, you do have to wrap the edge with this special tape. And once more, when we do cut out the rectangular holes, because we're going to need to do two, we're going to need to do one for that rail and one for that rail, we are going to need to make sure that none of these elements are exposed, and we're also going to need to take this special tape and wrap the edge right here, which I'll show you how we do that. But the final thing I want to mention is that thermostat. Make sure the thermostat is not located under the seat back. It is recommended to locate the thermostat 1 to 2 inches from the edge of the seat back. So this is the seat back, so we want to have that thermostat 1 to 2 inches away from that seat back. It's important that we position that thermostat properly, because if we put it, underneath the seat in the back, we run the risk of possibly burning our passengers, because there's more airflow back there and it can't really sense what the true temperature of these pads are. So that's a really important safety element right there. So I think I've explained that pretty well. When you do buy this kit, just make sure you read the directions very thoroughly. They're very well thought out. There's great diagrams. And I'm starting to get excited. Okay, so I had my pad tucked in the first fold. I had the thermostat probably 1 inch back from the seat back, and I'm getting ready to make my marks. Now I had this tucked down really well into the fold here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure about 1/8 of an inch back from where it currently is. So I'm just going to do a little Sharpie mark, and there are these lines across the whole pad, so it's going to be really easy to cut this evenly and cleanly. Now towards the front of my seat, it's not going to make this last little fold, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a mark where we're going to kind of cut this, well, we are going to cut this, we're going to cut it all the way across. So we're going to have to tape this up, tape these two seams up, and tape the other edge right there. And another important thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to cut out a little piece of foam for where that thermostat is. But first things first, let's get this cut and taped up. Okay, I believe I've crossed all my T's, dotted all my I's. The fit looks good. I can still feel that we're still going to have good access to where these orange clips are. I did cut out a little bit of foam for that thermostat, so when I push on it, it's just about flush. I mean, it sticks out a little bit, but you know, when you sit on it, because I cut out that little bit of foam, I don't think we're going to even feel that. So now it's just a matter of making sure everything's as aligned as possible. So we'll do that. Pretty good. Feels centered. All right, I'm gonna go for it. Pretty happy with that. Okay, not too shabby. Pretty darn happy with that. Now the question is, do I put the bottom seat back together before I start the top? And I think the answer is yes. I'm going to try and snap the bottom seat back together at least somewhat before we start working on that upper element. So once again, just got to reverse the process. There's that piece of fabric in the back here that I got to stretch over the foam, and I got to get the wire up over that fabric. That's what I'm doing now, but I'm going to put this bottom seat back together. I think it's really self-explanatory on how this goes back together, especially if you're the one taking this apart, then you have a pretty good understanding of how to put things back together. So let me get this back together a bit, and then I'll get back with you when we're getting ready to install the element on the backrest. Okay, so I'm about ready to install the element for the backrest. As you can see, I made a little cutout down there for the thermostat. Here's the thermostat. And thankfully this element is not going to require any cutting. So when I push back on this, that heating element just recedes back into that foam. Again, same thing, blue channels, a couple of the orange clips. What I am noticing, my favorite way to remove these clips is actually to take this 45-degree pick. And if I can get in here, what I'll do, try and focus for a minute. What I'll do, I'll come in here on the left side with this 45 pick. So I'll come in on the left, peel it off that lip, and then if I can, I'll come back on the right side and peel that lip back. And then generally that channel just pops right back out. Now, I did reinstall those clips on the bottom pad, the bottom cushion, and I found that the easiest way to reinstall this is once again to take the 45-degree pick and just push down really hard on the back lip of the channel and then guide it with the other hand, and just you just got to put a lot of pressure and make sure it's lined up right, and then it will go right back in there. But you can't just fold this back over and push and hope that it'll go back in. You really got to guide this with a pick or something of that nature. But I tell you, these picks are probably one of the best tools you could have for doing a job like this. So I'm going to get that element in there. I'm going to get this seat reassembled. I don't think you guys really need to see that. I think the important thing is seeing the disassembly. And then from there, I got to start working on the harness. And then eventually I need to do the driver's seat as well. It's a good bit of work, but if I'm saving tens of thousands of dollars of not upgrading to the next trim level, and I'm still going to get heated seats, well then I'm a happy camper. It's well worth the effort for me. But everything's back together. Looks as good as it was when I took it apart. I didn't break any clips, so everything looks real good. I have the airbag connection back together. That's all how it should be. And here are the two wires that go to the two elements. So I took some 7-strand trailer wire. I ran that through the firewall, and that's going to tie into one of the upfitter switches. I also ran the harness for the seat elements along the floorboard. I know this isn't the best way to do it, but there's never going to be people really stepping here. There's not going to be a lot of pressure. I know ideally that should be encased in like hard plastic like what the factory ran, but you know, I'm not worried about those wires at all. And I ran that wire through here. And if you have carpet, I mean, it's no different. You could just stick your hand under here, lift it up a little bit, take a piece of copper and fish the wires through the floor. I mean, really your only other option is to go underneath the truck, and I think the wires are much safer up inside the cab. But I just popped out that wire harness up through this little port right here with the other main seat connections. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, we can reinstall this seat, and then I need to plug the battery back in, turn the truck around so I have access to the driver's side. We'll do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll finish up the wiring and give this puppy a test. Still a lot of work to do though. Alright, I finished putting these seats back in last night, and I got them all wired up, pretty much finished the wire harnesses. I just really had to tuck them back up underneath the console there. But I was so excited that I actually took this truck for a test drive right at about midnight last night. And let me tell you, these heated seats are incredible. It took a little bit longer for them to heat up than what it would probably take a cloth seat to heat up. I'd say it took about 5 minutes for these things to really get cranking and for me to really feel it. But after 5 minutes, man, my backside was nice and toasty. Let me tell you, it makes all the difference driving in the wintertime. So once again, that's how the switches came out. Shut this light off for a moment. I'll talk about the wire harnesses one more time. So as mentioned earlier, you have 2 wire harnesses. One wire harness corresponds to one seat, and each seat again has 2 elements. So on each harness you have 2 of these connectors. One of these connectors goes to the rolling switch, and then the other connector goes directly underneath the floor, and it ties into, you can see it right there, ties directly into the elements right there. So again, if I ever need to take these seats out again, I can just disconnect these elements, lift the whole thing right out, and not have to worry about cutting through wires. So I'm really happy with how that came out. And then on the harness, we have a fused constant power line, and then we also have a 12-volt trigger line. So it's all up to you on how you want to wire this. If you want to, do a fuse tap, something like that. If you want to have constant power on, and then when you turn the ignition on, you could tie the ignition wire into the hot tap. Just read the instructions however you want to wire it. But once again, for me, I wire these into my upfitter switch number 1. So whenever that switch comes on, it sends 12 volts up to 25 amps of power down this white line, which that's tied in the engine compartment. I'll show you that in a minute. And that just sends power to the constant 12 volt as well as the trigger line. So these kind of come on completely. And I do kind of like the idea of having the ability to shut this system off if it does so happen to malfunction. I doubt that it will, but it's just nice to have that option. So if I turn the key into the on position, throw upfitter switch number 1, you can see that there's a nice blue light right here, and then you can just roll this up to whatever setting you want your seats on. That's for the passenger, obviously, and this is for the driver. One other quick tip on wiring: if you are like me and you plan to add a lot of accessories to your vehicle in the future, as opposed to adding one wire at a time for each accessory, you should just do one run through the firewall with this stuff. This is 7-strand trailer wire, and it's in this nice thick heavy jacket, so you really don't have to put loom over this. And the nice thing about this stuff, it's a little bit expensive, but we have different gauge wires. If you look right here, we have 4 14 gauge wires, 1 12 gauge, and 2 10 gauge wires. So I took that 7-strand wire, I ran it into the console right here. It goes behind the glove box, through the firewall, and up by the upfitter switch block, which will go in the engine compartment in a moment there. But as you can see, I took one of the 10 gauge wires, the white wire, and that's what feeds the relays for the heated seats. Now I do plan to add air horns in this truck in the future, so I have all these wires I could use for my air horn switches and anything else I want to add in the future. But if you do have a modern day Power Stroke like I do, Ford does have pass-through wires, but honestly I'm not a huge fan of them. You have to make connections at each of the pass-through wire points, so you need to add extensions on either side of the firewall. So you have a lot of connections in the wire, which isn't great, and also the gauge of those pass-through wires are not great either. So what I ended up doing, if you plan to do what I did, you're gonna have to take off the fender well, no big deal. And then once you get behind the fender well, you'll find that there is a grommet where the main wire harness passes through the firewall. I just cut a hole on either side of that and inserted my 7-strand trailer wire through the firewall and brought it up right along here. As you can see right here to the left side of the upfitter switch relay box, this is where all my unused wires are, and this is the one used wire. I probably should throw a little bit of split wire loom on that because it's right next to, I believe that's the EGR system. Could be incorrect there, but yeah, this is the wire that feeds power to the heated seats. And again, if I ever want to add any more accessories in the future, you know, I have all these wires pre-run right here, so it's just going to be really easy to plug in whatever system I want to add to the truck next.